Cities need two basic things to survive: electricity and water. Now that might not sound all that exciting, but there are some things in today's video that we have all been hoping for a long, long time.
To understand the basic needs of your citizens, you need only look in the mirror. Like you and me, there are a few important things they need to live healthy, happy lives. That includes electricity, water, and sanitation.
So right off the bat, I love that the word sanitation is paired with a shot of a river that would make Willy Wonka blush. Seriously, this looks like the chocolate river from the first Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie, the one with Gene Wilder, the good one. It genuinely looks pretty much the same, and I know that's a disgusting comparison to make when you think about the context of what we're looking at right now, but I'm almost certain it's about the same shade of brownish red. Like, I don't know if it's just my monitor's color settings, but that's an alarming shade of brownish red to have in that water, and I don't know how I feel about it. I just wanted to point out that I love that. Sanitation, here you go. A river full of, you know, schmeckus.
With these systems in place, everyone in your city has a shot at living their best life. Let's take a look at electricity. When laying roads, you also install low-voltage underground cables that supply electricity to homes, offices, and shops. These cables plug into transformer stations. Transformer stations are also connected to the high-voltage power lines streaming from your city's power plants. They act as a junction where low-voltage cables and high-voltage lines link up.
Now, something I've noticed about the transformer stations is that they might not always be essential, at least in my experience so far, because things like the small coal power plant actually do connect to the power lines in a road ahead of it. The thing that transformer stations are useful for, though, is bringing power in from the region, or of course, if you do want to do a long distance sort of span of cables from a power plant to a different part of your city or a different part of the map, you are going to want to step down from the larger cables via the transformer station into cables underneath the road or more local, sort of less high voltage power cables for a little town or whatever you might be building, wherever you might be building it. I like that you have those options, though. As always, with City Skylines 2, options and customizations and choices seem to be the theme, and that's no different with how you get power around your city. So transformer stations are something that, in my experience, like I said, I haven't used too much, but I suspect I'm probably going to get around to using them a whole lot more.
Together, they form the grid that pumps electricity right across your city. There's one drawback. Power lines and electric cables can only carry so much electricity. When demand increases, they can max out, creating a bottleneck. Keep the grid humming by evenly spreading electricity connections around your city. You can also build power lines to import electricity from neighboring cities. Imported energy will save your bacon if local power plants fail to produce enough electricity when demand increases. It will, too. Expect spikes when the thermostat drops and everyone dials up their heaters. Hot weather will cause spikes, too, as people flick on air conditioners, fans, and ice machines at the same time.
So higher demand for power during hot and cold weather is something I wasn't aware of, but it just makes sense. If we go back to the previous episode of this little series of looking at all these things, I mentioned that there are things in City Skylines 2 that just make sense. It's one of those things that, of course, it works that way. And in this case, of course, power demand goes up during hot and cold weather because people are heating up their homes or cooling down their homes and businesses, etc., etc. And this does also link back to what I've said in the past about having to prepare your cities for the winter months. And in this case, you're also going to have to prepare them for the summer months as well. Once again, it's just another level of management. It's another level of planning. It's another level of preparation. And it's something else that you do have to stay on top of and pay attention to when not only just running your city, but also designing your city. That's something you're going to want to be wary of, because let's say you have a small coal power plant and it's sort of teetering on the edge of being overloaded. If it trickles over into winter, it might not be enough to power your city. So you might have to prepare for that. You can either expand the plant, upgrade the plant, import the power, Or you could give it more budget. There's a lot of options for how you could handle this kind of thing.
Your power plants might produce more electricity than your city needs. When that happens, you can export it to your neighbors. While this can offset production costs, think it through. By storing excess electricity in emergency battery stations, you have nothing to worry about when demand rises. Emergency battery stations help your city get the most out of solar power plants. Battery stations power the city at night when the plant isn't producing electricity and recharge when they operate during the day. Of course, solar is just one renewable energy source. You can build wind, water, and geothermal power plants too. Fossil fuels are another way to power your city. Or you can go nuclear. Let's talk water and sanitation. Surface water sources are the same as in city skylines. Expect flowing rivers, glittering lakes, and vast, swirling oceans. Groundwater is different. These underground reservoirs replenish over time, so they can run dry if they're drained at a faster rate than they're refilled. They're also susceptible to ground pollution. When they're contaminated, dirty water is pumped into your city's freshwater system. That's bad on every level, mainly because decontamination takes a long time. Build a groundwater pumping station to tap this resource, and a water pumping station to bring surface water into your city's water system.
I don't know about you, but I occasionally go through phases where I'll watch documentaries on YouTube, and usually they're about things that I had zero interest in before watching it, and usually I don't have any further interest in those things after watching it. But I recently watched one about a project called the Great Man-Made River in Libya that has been getting worked on since 1984. So almost 40 years, they have been working on a project to access underground aquifers and then provide water from these things to the major cities in the country. That's completely irrelevant to this video, to be quite honest with you, because City Skylines is basically doing a similar thing. You've got underground water that you can access, but much like in real life, if you use and abuse that source of water, it is going to run out and it is going to take a very long time to replenish. In real life, it might never be replenished. It might take generations to replenish or longer, usually hundreds of years, I'm pretty sure. I'm sure it's not going to be like that in City Skylines 2, but I do like that that is something you have to be wary of. This thing that you're relying on from the start of your city could very well run out because you didn't account for the expansion of your city. You just relied on the underground water source and it's now gone. What are you going to do about it? Probably go and start sucking up some water from a river or find some other groundwater sources, but that is going to be something to pay attention to. That's something I'm excited to stay on top of. And honestly, while I might never forget to place pipes under roads ever again because it's done automatically, I do suspect that I'm going to forget to stay on top of my groundwater sources.
You can also add water to the system with wastewater treatment plants. These plants can process sewage to produce clean water for homes and businesses. There's another way to manage sewage: sewage outlets. They release waste into open water, which can help prevent sewage from backing up. And that's a must when it comes to public health. Bungling waste management can make people seriously ill. That's why you want to keep sewage outlets well away from pumping stations. How can you balance the very human needs of citizens with your ambition as a city builder? It's simple. Imagine living your life down there, day in and day out.
And so another day, another conclusion to the feature highlights portion of this video. Interestingly, just a couple of weeks ago, just as recently as a couple of weeks ago, I completely screwed up and polluted the water source in my current City Skylines 1 series and just about killed everybody. There was something like 72,000 people in the city. It got as low as 10,000 people. I was sitting close to $10 million. It was beneath $1 million at its worst point. It was very nearly game over. So this is all stuff that, at least for me, after 8.5 years of City Skylines and thousands of hours, somehow I still need to pay attention to these things and make sure that I'm not overlapping my polluted water with the water that we're pulling up for people to drink. So that's something I'm going to have to stay on top of in City Skylines 2 as well, although the maps have a bit more scale to them, so hopefully it's not going to be a problem, but there's no guarantees. What I will say is that I think the biggest takeaway from all of this, and we've seen it before, we've talked about it before, but it's the fact that both the cables and the pipes are automatically underneath all of the roads, excluding highways, but that's okay. I just like it. I just like the convenience. It's a quality of life improvement that goes a really long way. It's something that we all typically did anyway. We always put our pipes underneath our roads as neatly as we possibly can, and now the game just does it for you, so you can get to building your city a little bit quicker. You don't have to go through that process of laying out these beautiful intricate grids and then zoning everything, giving them power, and then letting the simulation run only to discover that you haven't given them water. You don't need to worry about that anymore. And for me, as someone that routinely forgets to provide pipes to new districts, I appreciate that. I love that, and I'm thankful for that. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at the developer insights and see what kind of insights we can get into everything that we've seen so far.
Let's get electrified with electricity and water. Just like in City Skylines 1, in City Skylines 2, the electricity and water are very critical for your city. Without electricity and water, your city cannot function. Now the player can put the cables either overground or underground.
Now, we did just get done talking about underground cables a little bit, so I'm just going to repeat myself and say that they are hugely welcome, and I love that we no longer need ugly power lines connecting different regions if you don't want them. You can have everything be underground. You don't need pylons crossing the landscape anymore, which is good because if you have little remote projects that you're building, you don't need giant pylons right beside them. You can have these beautiful scenic locations without massive metal skeletons with cables and wires hanging from them. And I think that's good. Now, something that isn't mentioned in this video, but has been seen in some gameplay videos, is that there are different sizes for the above ground power lines, including 2 different sizes for the larger metal pylons and 2 different sizes for the smaller wooden power poles that take the lower current. That is another level of detail that I really appreciate. And it does mean that if you wanted something that looked a bit more like a rural power line, you have that option, as well as building something that's huge and like a cross-country power line with the giant metal pylons. So that's a little something that I know it's been covered here and there. I know it wasn't covered here in this video in any of the dev diary stuff, and I can't show you it. I'm not allowed to show you any gameplay on top of what's in these videos. That's all I can do. But they are a thing. They do exist. They're really cool. And having little regional sort of rural power lines is something that I'm going to love. I'm going to love just running little power lines up to my farms and out to my remote factories and all that good stuff. It's really satisfying to do. And it's just another level of detail that you can do to make your cities that little bit more authentic. I don't want to use the word detailed again because I just said it's another level of detail to make your cities more detailed, right? But that's what it is. That's what it is. All right. I'm not a thesaurus. Okay. I play a lot of City Skylines. I'm not a thesaurus. I also apparently can't say the word thesaurus. There we go. I got it. All right, let's move on.
Groundwater is water that is underground and that has to be accessed with the groundwater pump. Groundwater is a somewhat limited resource. If you overpump it, then it will run out. The emergency battery station is a support building for your electricity city service. It can support your electric grid in dire times.
So I don't typically play with the day-night cycle because I'm always either recording or streaming my gameplay. And honestly, nighttime gameplay doesn't really translate all that well to videos. I don't think it's all that much of an enjoyable viewing experience, and it can be a little frustrating to play games like this during the night as well because it's a little harder to see what you're doing. But I might experiment with it a little bit just to get some experience with balancing solar power and batteries. I really like the idea of leaning into greener cities with City Skylines 2. I always had the idea of doing that with City Skylines 1, and I think I did do it once with the Green Cities DLC. I don't remember how successful I was, but I love the idea of leaning into wind power, solar power, geothermal, and just seeing if we can store a bunch of that power in batteries so that when the sun goes down and the solar fields are a little bit less efficient or not working at all, power just comes out of the batteries. The city just keeps on ticking. It can be the city that never sleeps, despite the fact that half the power generation isn't running at nighttime. I think that'd be cool. I think it'd be a good experiment. And I think, honestly, I am tempted to turn on the day-night cycle because I almost feel like, in a way, I'm missing out on a portion of the simulation, the management, and the gameplay.
The emergency battery station is a great companion for the solar power station. During the daytime, the solar power station can charge up the emergency battery station, and during the nighttime, the emergency battery station can release the energy back into the electricity grid. The game features two different kinds of cables, the high voltage and the low voltage. High voltage can transfer a lot of electricity via the single cable line. The low voltage cables transfer a low amount of electricity by themselves. The low voltage cables are also built into the roads.
For the third or fourth time today, I'm going to say it again. Everybody's going to say it again. Everyone's already said it. Cables and pipes in roads are one of the best quality of life changes coming in Cities Skylines 2 when compared to Cities Skylines 1. Including both of those things in the roads is an absolute treat.
The cables have a limit to how much they can transfer. So if you're powering a whole district via the low voltage power cables, it can cause some bottlenecks. To bypass these bottlenecks, you can either build more cables to the area or build a high voltage cable into the district and then transfer that into the low voltage via the transformer station.
I'm not sure if I remember any other city builders simulating overloaded cables like this, but it's a welcome aspect of the overall simulation that, much like everything else we've seen so far and that we've covered so far, really only serves to provide more depth to the management of each city. And it gives you that little bit more to think about when expanding your cities to add new districts, right? Because you can't necessarily just say, let's power an entire neighborhood off of this one little sort of low voltage cable. You can't just have this one little road connection serving to power, a bunch of high rises and apartments and offices and businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be a way in which you're going to be encouraged to use the transformer stations. You might have to have a little network underneath your city of these sort of higher voltage cables to make sure that your new neighborhoods can be powered properly. This isn't actually something I've experimented with too much, but that's kind of what I'm reading into this. And once again, that just serves to say, hey, you probably want to be a little bit more careful when planning your city. You probably do want to make sure that you have multiple, power connections to your district. So multiple roads going in will do that, or just manually running the little cables underground. But I think by the sounds of it, the safest thing you could do is theoretically have a series of underground high voltage cables to make sure that everything in every neighborhood is powered properly, isn't being overloaded, and that way your Sims aren't going to be suffering as a result.
All your favorite electricity buildings from Cities Skylines 1 are back in Cities Skylines 2. They have been powered up and they are now even bigger and better. Just like with other city services, the electricity and water and sewage buildings have a ton of upgrades. Upgrades bring variety and options for you as a player, so you can either improve your city productions or electricity capacity storage, or sewage treatment, or water and pumping and... Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, where we go over the maps and themes.
And so this concludes our little adventure into electricity and water in Cities Skylines 2. I'm going to be honest with you. This was one of the more interesting developer insight and feature highlight videos to put together because, to be quite honest with you, it's one of the shorter ones. There's not really that much to talk about when it comes to electricity and water in Cities Skylines because it's relatively straightforward. Most city builders do it the same way. You build a power plant, you build a water source, you connect it up with pipes and cables and go to town. So yeah, there's not really too much for me to add to this conversation, but I didn't want to skip two of the videos to just be like, hey, we're going to get to the exciting stuff. So Today's episode's definitely a little bit more mellow. It's a little bit more chill, a little bit shorter, but I do think we got to talk specifically about some things that we have touched on before, but that I am still very excited about. Obviously, the underground cables, the renewable energy and the batteries with solar and all that good stuff as well. And I do think the power demand from changes in weather is going to make things, I do use the word dynamic a lot, but I think this is one of the situations where it really applies, because it does mean that things are going to change. It once again means that seasons matter. As I've said before, you're no longer just picking a map and it's snowy all the time. Therefore, you need hot water pipes as well as the cold water pipes. It changes. So at different times of the year, your demand for power is going to be different. You are going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to plan for that. So that's another way in which you could potentially overload your small low voltage cables, because during summer, everyone's running their air conditioning units. And so the cables you have aren't good enough. Whereas during the rest of the year, it's maybe not so bad. I don't really have all that much experience with all this stuff just yet. I've mostly been focusing on the city that I put out in my gameplay video. So I'm excited to play a bunch more Cities Skylines 2 and see how exactly all this stuff works and see how deep this rabbit hole goes. But what I'm most curious about right now is what your favorite part of all of this is. Which part of the electricity and water and sanitation systems in Cities Skylines 2 really floats your goat? Yeah, we're gonna go with that. Which one of these really boring things just gets you going, gets you out of bed in the morning? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.